Wish Chapter 18. Me and Howard rode our bikes up and down the mountain road all morning long. We tromped through the woods, pushing our way around the thick shrub and stepping over prickier bushes. We went back to the creek behind Howard's house 3 times, calling and whistling. We peered under the porches and open sheds and circled barns. By lunchtime, the blazing summer sun overheated left pockets of melted asphalt in the road and trickles of sweat down our backs. We didn't talk much, and that was fine by me. I'd gone over and over in my head how I would say I'm sorry to Howard for what I'd said about his wish. But whenever I thought the time was right, my mouth went dry and my throat squeezed up, and the words I planned to say stayed bottled inside. We went back to Gus and Bertha's a few times to check the trap, but the table scraps were still in the pie tin. We had lunch on Howard's front porch, sitting on the couch eating Wiener sausages and cold pork and beans off our paper plates on our laps. Dwight and Cotton were out in the yard throwing rocks at the mailbox. They hit the metal with a loud thwang and left little dents on the sides. Miss Oden came out and told them to stop, and then she sat on the couch and told me not to worry. She was sure Wishbone would come back. "You got to think positive," she said. "Yes, ma'am," I mumbled. Did she know I'd said that mean thing to Howard? If she knew, I bet she wouldn't want me on her team anymore. That afternoon, Burl drove us into the wood in search of parking lots and dumpsters. Dwight and Lenny made some lost dog signs, and we nailed them to the telephone pole and fence posts. It was almost supper time when me and Howard rode our bikes back to Gus and Bertha's to check the traps one more time. Then we sat in long chairs out by the garden and watched dragonflies flit over the tops of the marigolds. In my head, I said, "Howard, I'm sorry I said that about your wish. You know about your up-down walk?" Then I said, "Shoot, nobody even cares about your up-down walk." But then he'd know that it was a big fat lie, 'cause he saw those kids leaving him out in the kickball games and cutting a line in front of him like he was invisible. So I sat there in silence with my thoughts spinning in my head. Maybe he didn't care about what I said. I mean, he was still being nice to me. He was helping me look for Wishbone. "You sure don't look forlorn," Howard said. I didn't know one other kid in the whole world who would use the word forlorn. That was the perfect word to describe me, forlorn. Just before supper, Jackie called out and told me she went to see Scrappy in jail and he got a tattoo. "Don't you even want to know what it is?" she asked. When I didn't say anything, sure. "A bird," she said. "A blackbird in a cage right on the back of his hand. Can you believe that?" "I guess." Then she rambled on about how graduating from high school wasn't all as it's cracked up to be, and how she hated her job at the Waffle House. "People leave the tables all nasty with syrup," she said, "and they plop their crying babies in high chairs and expect me to bring them a blueberry waffle in like a minute." She told me that her boyfriend Arlo wrecked his car and turned out to be a loser, and Kara Lee saw him at the mall with Darla Jacobs, she said. So I told him, "Adios, sucker," and then, "Aren't you going to ask me about Wishbone?" I said. "What?" I'd been telling her all about Wishbone when she called, how smart he is and how he learned to sit and stay, how he slept beside my bed. "Wishbone," I said, "my dog, aren't you gonna ask me about him?" "Oh, sure," she said. "How is Wishbone?" "Gone," I hollered. "He's gone," and then I swept out the whole sorry story about how he'd run off and I looked everywhere, but I figured he'd rather be a stray than live with me. I tried to stop, but I couldn't. I moved on to how he didn't want me in the same as nobody else wanted me, and how I hoped she was enjoying her perfect life while I was stuck here in Colby with a bunch of squirrel-eating hillbillies. And then I hung up and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. I could see Bertha in the kitchen stirring something on the stove and pretending like she hadn't heard me. When the phone rang again, I just looked at it there in my hand. Bertha stopped stirring. Ring, ring, ring. "Hello," I said in a trembly voice. "Charlie?" Jackie's voice floated through the telephone line, soft and sure. From Ray to Colby, I picked up that voice traveling from Carol Lee's fancy brick house along the highways and over treetops, and then up the winding roads and down the gravel driveway into the little house perched on the side of the mountain, and finally getting to me, sitting on the floor and needing to hear it. "I'm sorry about Wishbone," Jackie said. "I really am. I hope he comes back." I watched a fly dart from the window screen to the lamp on the ceiling. "Charlie," Jackie said. "What?" I know this whole situation has been hard on you. Situation? Is that what this was? A situation? I think Mama's getting better, Jackie said. I talked to her yesterday and she sounded better. What did that mean? That she got out of bed? That she got on her feet on the ground? That she cared one little bit about me? That I'd go back to Riley and our broken family would suddenly disappear? And in its place would be a real family holding hands and saying the blessing? Maybe I can come visit you soon, Jackie went on. I'm getting my driver's license in a couple of weeks. Did I tell you that? And Carol Lee got a car from graduation. Can you believe that? If I got some time off from my God-forsaken job, I could come to Colby. We could go to Asheville and hang out. Then have vegan restaurants there. Did you know that? I'm thinking about becoming vegan. I bet if She jabbered on about all the things we could do. But she left out one part, how she would go back to her perfect life and I'd still be out here without my dog. And wishing I hadn't been mean to Howard. That night, when Gus was home, the three of us drove around looking for Wishbone. We went down to the school and over the diner. We drove through the trailer parks and up alleys. While we drove, Bertha told us a story she'd read in the newspaper about a dog that fell out of the back of a van in North Carolina and managed to find his way all the way back home in Indiana. Almost 400 miles, she said. The family had been on vacation over in Maggie Valley. I can't hardly believe that. Gus was quiet, shifting a toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other while he scanned the roadside and the parking lots, in the woods as he drove. Every now and then he said, "Don't worry, Butterbean, we'll find him." But I was thinking that maybe now was the time to change my wish. Maybe next time I got a chance, I should wish for my dog to come back. Finally, it got too dark to see much anymore, so we headed home. We turned into the driveway. That old cars bounced and squeaked over the holes, the crunch of the tires on the gravel echoing in the still evening air. The headlights sent beams of light dancing through the mountain laurel and chokeberries beside the driveway. Finally, the house came into view, and I thought my heart was going to leap right out of me when I saw. There was Wishbone, waggling his tail as he trotted towards us, dragging his leash on the ground behind him.